Caleb Johnson pretty much on his back, put the team on his back though, put them into relevancy. I mean, they go from 15 points per game last year offensively to 28 this year. There's not a wide receiver that the defense needs to be concerned about or a quarterback. It's Caleb Johnson. Every week, the defense is saying, let's stop Caleb Johnson. And every week, they couldn't stop Caleb Johnson. The more and more I scout the 2025 class, the more I'm starting to really like this class. Honestly, I think it's better than people realize. The last time I gave you my top 50 rankings was December 17th. We are far past due for an update. So much has changed in my rankings. And I want to make something very clear. Today, you will be looking more at like a big board rather than actual Dynasty rookie rankings, simply because it's impossible to really rank these guys without draft capital and landing spots, right? When those come in, obviously rankings will drastically change. Starting with tier number 1, there has nothing's been changed since the last time I did this video. It is still Ashton Jeanty. He's still up there all on his own. I've been telling people that he's in the same tier as Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson for me as a Dynasty asset right here, right now. Like if you're trading for the 101, what would it cost to go out and get a Jahmyr Gibbs or a Bijan Robinson? That's really thrown a lot of people off, and I'm struggling to really understand as to why. Ashton Jeanty, in every sense of the word, is an elite prospect. We know he's going to go top 15 in the NFL draft. If he doesn't, sure. If he falls down the board, I'll change my expectations. But, I mean, even when you compare his season here, where he probably should have won Heisman, to some of the best prospects in the last 15 years, like Saquon Barkley in 2016 and Jonathan Taylor in 2019, Zeke in 2015, Derrick Henry in 2015. I mean, he completely blows these guys out of the water. From a yardage perspective, from touchdown to yards per attempt, to breakaway percentage with the explosive plays, to the elusive rating, to the PFF rushing grade, to breaking tackles. By the way, Ashton Jeanty literally set records for breaking tackles, yards after contact per attempt. I mean, the man is the king of the all lemons to lemonade team, which basically strips away your offense, strips away your conference, and says, you know what? Forget the offensive line, forget the offense, forget the team you're on. What do you do with every touch? Per touch, are you creating more with less? And Ashton Jeanty did it better than anybody in this class, point blank period, by far a historic number, 0.4 missed tackles forced per attempt. I mean, I don't understand why why people are discrediting Ashton Jeanty. He is an elite prospect. He should be in a tier of his own. We should rank him with the Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs of the world. And if you're worried about his receiving profile, for some reason, that's something people bring up. Well, go look at 2023, all right? Because who led the nation in receiving yards amongst running backs? Who led the nation in receptions amongst running backs? Ashton Jeanty's 2023 season, he had more receptions and receiving yards than any single season Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs had in college, point blank, period. They clearly wanted to get him over 2,000 rushing yards this year. That's why they didn't use him in the passing game. I don't get it. He is in his tier of his own, and I will stand on that till the day I die, which hopefully will be a long time from now. All right, moving into tier 2, I think there's a huge tier, and yes, draft capital landing spot could, make this tier smaller, but I'm going to start off with my wide receiver 1A, 1B. They're tied right now. I don't care which way you slice this, Luther Burden and Tet McMillan. Now, funnily enough, I've been trying to defend Luther Burden on this channel for a hot minute, and I've been getting a lot of pushback from people saying, well, that means you hate Tet. Well, you're an idiot, because look at Luther Burden's production. Now, funnily enough, the GOAT of wide receiver evaluation himself, Matt Harmon, tweeted out about Luther Burden recently, and I'm imagining that maybe the pushback will be a little bit less. I love both of these players. All right, they're giving you something a little bit different. Do you like strawberry jam, or are you more of a blueberry jam type of person? Do you like, a Pop-Tart or a toaster strudel? What type of flavor do you like to work with? Because both of these guys are absolutely fantastic prospects. Funnily enough, actually, if you look at the 2023 offseason, Luther Burden and Tet McMillan were right on each other's tails. Both had incredible seasons, right? Both over 1,200 receiving yards, both over 9 touchdowns, over 120 targets. Obviously Luther Burden was absolutely dominant in the yak per reception or total yak type of number. We know how good he is after the catch. So what happened? Well, I've spent majority of my time trying to tell you guys why I love the player Luther Burden, right? Which, I am in love with him. A yak monster. I think he's a great route runner. I think there's great tempo in his route running. He wins jump balls. He's got incredible hands. He's dynamic. He's explosive. He's got a quick release package. Make your man miss ability in the open field, right? I think we're seeing a JSN Deebo Samuel baby, a little Rashee Rice to his game, But what I haven't focused on enough, and shout out to one of our community members who noticed this, is I haven't told you enough as to why I believe that there was this lack of production this year. Yes, the offense wasn't that great. Yes, Brady Cook took a step back, but there is even further more context here. Shout out to Mark who commented this, and he said it better than I ever could. He said his worst 3 games of the year were Buffalo, Alabama, and Arkansas. So let's break that down. Buffalo was a 34-0 blowout in which he only played 13 passing snaps. Okay, that makes sense. Brady Cook was hurt for Alabama game, so they had a 3rd-string quarterback, Drew Pine, right? Wasn't that great. The Arkansas game was played in a snowstorm, which if you go watch the film, it's true. It was played in a snowstorm. Mizzou ran the ball 47 times, only 20 passes. And then the Auburn and Oklahoma games were also with Drew Pine, their backup quarterback. If you eliminate those games, his stat line over 9 games is about 54, 647, and 6 touchdowns, giving him a pace of 72 catches, 863 yards, and 8 touchdowns in 12 games. Again, 12-game pace. So again, he also didn't play in the bowl game. You know, you kind of start to put all these pieces of the context together and you start to understand why the production is an issue for some people, but why it shouldn't really matter, at least for me, in my opinion. The film speaks volumes. Shout out to Mark for really doing a great job of summarizing that for us. Now, that doesn't mean Tet McMillan is an inferior player. That doesn't mean Tet McMillan can't be the wide receiver 1 by the end of the day. I love me some Tet McMillan, right? He is an incredible prospect. Guys, at 6'5", 212 pounds, you should not be able to move that way. You just simply should not be able to move as fluidly as he does. The size, speed, physicality, one-on-one ball winner, strong hands. He's a hell of a prospect, right? This is the Mike Evans at the catch point and Drake London after the catch type of player, right? I mean, at worst, at the very worst, he is a Mike Williams type of player. And again, that is at the worst. I mean, you compare some of these guys in their best seasons in college, you'll see Tet McMillan, you know, had a better year than Drake London coming out of college, but don't forget Drake London went down with an injury. Drake London's a damn good prospect. Some people think it's disrespectful to compare Tet to Drake London. Like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Don't forget how good Drake London was as a prospect, but the baseline, the floor comp is Mike Williams. And don't forget how good Mike Williams was coming out of Clemson in 2016, right? He had a better year than Tet in receptions, in receiving yards, in touchdowns, in targets. He had a better drop rate, so he was not a poor player himself, and he wasn't far off from Tet's total yak in the regular season. These numbers that you're seeing are regular season. Love these 2 players. I don't care which way you have it. They're both incredible, and it's okay not to have Tet as your unquestioned number 1. It's okay to think outside the box a little bit, right? All right, then we've got a run of running backs that I'm obsessed with here, right? We've got Amarion Hampton, Travion Henderson, and Caleb Johnson. I love every single one of these running back prospects. I could easily see any one of these guys going in the 1st round, by the way. Truly. Like if Amarion, Travion, or Caleb went in the 1st round, it would not surprise me. They're a 1st-round pick to the Vikings. I could definitely see that outcome. At worst, I see all these guys going round 2. The historical hit rate on a round 2 running back is super high, around 71%, but these are all incredible players. Amarion Hampton. Now, is Amarion Hampton Travion Henderson? No. Travion Henderson is going to dance in the open field. He's going to make you miss. He's going to make you look silly. He's going to send your ass to the hospital, but Amarion's going to run your ass over. He's going to break the tackle and run for 60 yards. I mean, Amarion Hampton led the nation in yards after contact in 2023. He was actually 16th in yards after contact per attempt. This year, he had 72 missed tackles forced. He was an absolute dog. If you look at Amarion Hampton's season this year compared to some of the players I compare him to, like Leonard Fournette, James Conner, Zeke Elliott, you can see he compares very favorable to actually Leonard Fournette in 2015 out of LSU. Those numbers are not that far off. I do believe Amarion can give you a very similar outcome to what Leonard Fournette gave, in his NFL career. He's James Conner at worst, right? Zeke Elliott is maybe too high of a prospect, but as far as play style, he's got some similarities there. He's a good pass catcher. He's a plant the foot, cut, hit the hole type of back, and there is definitely a place for that in the NFL. I can't wait to see him. And then you look at Travion Henderson. I mean, Travion Henderson, what I said when Judkins joined this team, I said, you know what? I need to see Travion Henderson really dominate from an efficiency perspective, and that's exactly what Travion Henderson did, right? He averaged 7 yards per carry. He went out there, had the 5th best PFF run grade. He was 11th in yards after contact per attempt and had a breakaway percentage of 54%, which was 16th best in the nation. I mean, the guy was as dominant as he could be in his role. I mean, he's an incredible processor, home run hitter, make your man miss ability. He has the ability to truly break fantasy football as a whole. I love the D'Angelo Williams comp, the Tiki Barber comp, the Aaron Jones comp, the Tony Pollard comp. I think he's got all of that in his game. And then Caleb Johnson. For whatever reason, every week there's like a new running back that Twitter is trying to discredit. And lately it's been Caleb Johnson for some strange reason, right? People are crediting his offensive line. And they're completely ignoring the context that Iowa's offense has been dog shit for like 5 years in a row. Think about this for a second. What's the last quarterback out of Iowa you remember? Or wide receiver? Can you remember any quarterbacks? What? No, of course you can't, because they've had terrible quarterback play, terrible wide receivers. I mean, you can think about tight ends, right? But Iowa's entire organization has been built on defense. All right. They've been bottom of, the Division I of college football and offensive points per game for the last 5 years. They've been towards the bottom of the league. And this year, Caleb Johnson pretty much on his back, put the team on his back though, put them into relevancy. I mean, they go from 15 points per game last year offensively to 28 this year. Incredible improvement. And every single week, there's not a wide receiver that the defense needs to be concerned about or a quarterback. It's Caleb Johnson. Every week, the defense is saying in the Big Ten, let's stop Caleb Johnson. And every week, they couldn't stop Caleb Johnson, right? Over 1,500 rushing yards, 6.5 yards per attempt, 21 touchdowns. He has special bursts for his size at 6 foot, 225 pounds. I don't know why people are questioning his long run speed. He's a pile mover. Break tackle ability is there. I see a ton of Larry Johnson. I see a ton of Nick Chubb to his game. Let's actually compare Caleb Johnson and Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb in 2017. Yes, I know that photo is wrong. I get it. All right. Make fun of me. But, also have to keep in mind Nick Chubb did split some opportunities at his college, but the efficiency is there, right? The elusiveness is there. The break tackles is there. The yards to contact is there. I think he's an incredible player. The last player in this tier is Travis Hunter. And I don't want to spend too long on this. Here's what I will say. When it was announced that Travis Hunter was planning to work out as a cornerback, for some reason, the Dynasty community fell apart. They were like, oh my God, it's over. Look, that's it. As if like, sorry, why was your expectation that he was ever going to test as a wide receiver? Think about it, guys, from a draft capital perspective. If he's going to play both cornerback and wide receiver, what matters more for draft capital? If he wants to go number 1 overall, if he goes out there and he dominates at the combine, incredible athletic testing, that is way more important for the cornerback position in your draft capital than it is the wide receiver position in your draft capital. We know the combine doesn't mean that much for wide receivers. It means a ton for the cornerback position. That is just a fact if you go ask anyone who covers the draft. So of course he's going to test as a cornerback. And by the way, we'll get all the testing numbers we need because they do a lot of the same testing. It's just the drills that are different. So I don't understand why this is, blowing people's minds, but yeah, he's testing as a cornerback. I don't know why that's surprising. If you want a customized game plan for your Dynasty offseason, then get the playbook by becoming a yearly Mother Flocker member with the promo code LAND. Not only do you get our team playbook, the live review, but you also get our 2025 rookie report where we dive deep into this class. Check out the pinned comment if you want to sign up and support the show. Let's get back to the video. All right, into tier 3. I've got a bunch of names that I love here. Emeka Egbuka, I will say this forever, the safest wide receiver prospect in this class, point blank period. You are not going to bust if you pick Emeka Egbuka. I mean, you might, but in a different way. But he's a chain mover, ankle breaker, slot specialist, great route runner, great versatility. I see a ton of Robert Woods, Juju Smith-Schuster. At worst, he's like a Jarvis Landry type of player. I don't think he has the highest ceiling of the wide receivers in this class, but he has the safest floor. Moving on to the quarterbacks, this is where we got them. Again, a big board. I understand when the draft actually happens, if these guys are truly top 5 picks, I will have to adjust. I hear you. But based off of purely evaluating talent, this is where I will put Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. I like both of these players. I don't love them. In fact, I don't really love this entire class, point blank period. But if I look at these quarterbacks and I compare them side by side, just purely based off stats, there's not that big of a difference. But when you dive into the film, I think that's where you see the biggest difference between these two players. I will say this, we keep talking about, wow, there's such a big bust potential for this class. I feel like there's big bust potential for Cam Ward. I don't think there's big bust potential for Shedeur Sanders. But I also don't think Shedeur Sanders has the same ceiling that Cam Ward has, right? I think Shedeur Sanders is going to be your Tua Tagovailoa, your Brock Purdy, middle of the pack starting quarterback in the NFL. Whereas with Cam Ward, there's such a wide range of outcomes. He could be the next Jordan Love. He could be the next Will Levis. There's a lot of work he still needs to do, and it's a little bit, confronting that he's a 5th-year senior and he still has some of these fundamental issues, like decision-making, not throwing the ball across your body 50 yards to the other side of the field and getting intercepted, right? Like these simple things where he's constantly trying to play hero ball, not playing within the structure of his offense. And a lot of people don't realize, by the way, when we go back to Shedeur Sanders had the worst pressure rate of any quarterback in college football in the last 2 years. He was number 1 and number 2 in total pressures in back-to-back seasons. So you put Shedeur Sanders in a situation where maybe he finally has a decent offensive line and he can just run an offense. He's going to be able to do that in the NFL. Whereas Miami had a great offensive line and Cam Ward was able to play a bunch of hero ball. I like both of these guys. I'm not really obsessed with them, I wouldn't say, and it will come down to draft capital landing spot. Right after those quarterbacks, we have 2 tight ends in Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren. Love both of these guys. Again, just like Luther Burden, just like Ted McMillan, what's your flavor? All right, you a Pop-Tart guy or you a toaster strudel guy? Because I love me some Colson Loveland. If you're going to use production as a reason to bump Tyler Warren up, that's not going to fly for me because production very rarely matters when it comes to actually predicting future success in the NFL for the tight end position. Mason and I actually talked about this on the Dynasty Flock channel recently, but it's more about the traits. It's more about the traits for the tight end position. Now, Tyler Warren is instantly going to improve an NFL offense day one, but he's going to do it in a way that he improves the run game, he improves the versatility, right? He might not be this huge receiving threat from day one, and an NFL team isn't just drafting him because he's a receiving threat. They're drafting him because the rushing game is going to be better by 50% from day one because of how good he is as a blocker, his toughness, right? When you're drafting a Colson Loveland, you are drafting him because you believe he can make an immediate impact for your receiving game, right? That's why you're drafting these 2 guys. So that's why I slightly prefer Loveland. I think he has that upside of like an Evan Ingram from day one, a guy who can garner 100 targets in his rookie season. Whereas Tyler Warren, there's like this range of like Trey McBride, which would be great, but also like a Taysom Hill where you're just not 100% sure exactly what the receiving game will look like. I will say the good news for Tyler Warren is that when you compare he and Trey McBride's seasons coming out of college, not that different. In fact, Tyler Warren obviously had more success in the touchdown category, but from every other category, pretty similar as a receiving threat. Although I will say I do think Trey McBride was a better route runner coming out. All right, we got 2 running backs to finish this tier, Quinshon Judkins and Cam Skattebo. Love both of these names. I'm a little bit lower on Judkins than the average consensus. I mean, if you compare Judkins' best season to like Kareem Hunt, who's one of my comparisons for him in 2016, or David Montgomery, who's one of my comparisons in 2018, we're talking about a guy in Quinshon Judkins who split opportunities with Travion Henderson. Yes, they had different roles, obviously, but they split opportunities. The reality is Quinshon Judkins had 156 attempts, right? He is not very high in the total attempts category in this class because he split opportunities with Travion Henderson and the efficiency is still really bad. 5.4 yards per attempt. The avoided tackles aren't there. The yards after contact per attempt aren't there. If you look at our all limits eliminate team, you'll see Quinshon Judkins at 17th, tied with Ollie Gordon and missed tackles forced per attempt. I just wish I saw more from an efficiency perspective from him this year. I think he's a good player. I think he's more David Montgomery than Joe Mixon, but that is my opinion. And speaking of the David Montgomery comp, that's exactly what I see with Cam Skattebo, a guy who is constantly breaking tackles, extending plays. He was second in missed tackles forced this year with 102. He's also second on the limits to eliminate team at 0.35, constantly creating more with every opportunity that he had. Fantastic strength and contact balance combo. You can't help but see David Montgomery there. Now, don't expect Cam Skattebo to test well at the combine. That doesn't matter, all right? The combine, for me, each and every year means less and less and less for the running back position. I mean, that's why people were out on names like Kyren Williams, for example. We all loved him before the combine. It's like, oh, damn, combine wasn't good. I guess we're out on Kyren Williams. So you have to grow from those areas. But he's also a great receiving threat. That's something that David Montgomery doesn't have as much right now in Detroit. I also love Javonte Williams as a comp. I'm a huge, huge fan of his game. All right, moving on to tier number 4. We've got Jalen Royals, one of my favorite sleeper wide receivers in the class. I love this kid, man. He absolutely dominated in the Mountain West at Utah State. Now, you have to keep in mind that he did only play 7 games because he went down with an injury, but he was on pace to have 103 receptions, almost 1,600 yards, and 11 touchdowns. He was on pace to dominate. He was doing it already. He just went down with that injury. And according to Dane Brugler of The Athletic, Jalen Royals has 10 catches of 50 plus yards in the last 2 seasons, which is number 1 in the FBS. This is a playmaker, a home run hitter, a dynamic, athletic, ridiculous yak threat with great body control. He has a contested catch rate of 66% in the last 2 years, caught 25 out of 38 contested catches. I think he's an incredible player. There's a little bit of a combination there of a Rashee Rice and a George Pickens. I'm a huge fan of his game. Right after that, we have Matthew Golden, who, when the stage was at its brightest, he shined, right? He put on an absolute show in the college football playoffs, absolutely dominate some of the best hands in the entire class, tier 1 ball skills. He had to have that with Quinn Ewers as his quarterback. Great speed, purposeful feet as a route runner, pure hands catcher. I see a ton of Brandon Cooks, T.Y. Hilton, Bobby Trees, Robert Woods, Emmanuel Sanders. I think he's going to be an incredible number 2 in the NFL. We've also got Elijah Arroyo here, who I am absolutely obsessed with. When you talk about traits for the tight end position, that's what you're getting with Elijah Arroyo. You're getting trait on trait on trait with him. He is such an incredible player. And I can't help but see some Zach Ertz to his game as a pro comparison, as a ceiling comparison. Some Zach Ertz, some David Njoku. At worst, he is like pre-2024 Jonnu Smith, where it's like this incredible player, but he needs to be schemed up the right way, right? Like Miami did for him. All right, we've also got 4 running backs to end this tier. Brashard Smith, DJ Giddens, Dylan Sampson, Devin Neal. They all have different areas of their game that I love. Brashard Smith, a converted wide receiver to running back prospect, and he is super dynamic, super explosive, has the best burst in this entire class. He is just a home run waiting to happen. We've also got DJ Giddens, who is constantly breaking tackles, constantly doing more with less. I don't know why people aren't higher on DJ Giddens. We've got a guy in the Big 12 who goes out there, has almost 1,400 rushing yards, 6.5 yards per attempt. He puts 235 receiving yards up, 8 total touchdowns on the year, and the film is good. I mean, he looks great at breaking initial contact. He's got a great analytical profile, and he's a young running back. He only started playing running back his sophomore year of high school. I don't get why more people aren't in love with this guy. I see a ton of Chuba Hubbard, some Tony Pollard to his game. Dylan Sampson is constantly doing more with less. He is, constantly making lemonade out of lemons. I'm a huge fan of his game. Tennessee didn't miss a beat when they moved on from Jalen Wright because he was so good. His production was ridiculously impressive. Over 1,600 all-purpose yards, 22 touchdowns. He was incredibly good and a great threat through the air. Devin Neal, one of the most creative players in the entire class. They all do great things. All right. Moving on to tier number 5, Jack Bech, one of my favorite sleeper wide receivers in the class. If you're a film guy, you're going to really love Jack Bech. If you're a spreadsheet guy, you might not really love him as much, and that is okay. But the film is just, it's undeniable, honestly. A big physical player with route running chops and some of the best hands in the class. This man has magnetic hands, all right? It's like 2 magnets coming together to snag the ball out of the air. You do not have to worry about the body catching. He has one of the best drop rates in this class. He's a zone menace. I mean, I see a ton of Puka Nacua to his game. I see a lot of Robert Woods to his game. I don't think he's going to be as good as those players. At worst, he's like a Tim Patrick, a versatile Gabe Davis, but I think he is a very good player and has a chance to be special in the NFL. We've also got Trey Harris here, right? Trey Harris is a great player. He has such a wide range of outcomes in this class, right? I mean, by far the widest range of outcomes. Size, speed, super fluid athlete, number 1 in yards per route run, number 4 in PFF receiving grade. Great athlete, great deep speed, but there's a lot of development that still needs to happen. The route tree needs more nuance. The routes are a little bit rounded off. There's a ton of free releases. The offense was very set up for him to succeed with a lot of, easy plays. Lacks that special suddenness, in my opinion. He was a 5th-year senior, 23 years old at the NFL draft. There's still a lot of development to go. He has like a unrealistic outcome of like a Nico Collins. That's a possibility. His ceiling, more like a realistic ceiling is like George Pickens and Christian Watson put together. And his floor is as low as like a Jonathan Mingo, Quentin Johnson. There's just such a range of outcomes with him. Couple more wide receivers here. Jalen Knoll, Tej Johnson, Jaden Higgins. I love those Iowa State receivers. They both have different roles in the NFL, but they both can be dominant, consistent producers. Tej Johnson, a name that I will back until the cows come home. I mean, when a guy shows you on film who he is, you better believe him. And Tej Johnson shows to be a dog. Then he goes to the Senior Bowl. He weighs in, and everyone's concerned about his 156 pounds. Then he goes out and beats everybody in press coverage. And it's like not even fazed by his size. Shows again why he's an absolute dog in the NFL. Only Malik Neighbors had a higher yards per route run in the 2024 class than Tez Johnson did that year. Moving on, we've got Harold Fannin Jr. here, a great player. Now, if he gets good draft capital, I will skyrocket him up. He is an incredible receiving threat. I just don't believe he's going to improve anybody's run game at all. I don't believe he's a good run blocker whatsoever. He looks a little bit lost at times. But again, if he gets second round draft capital, we'll move him up because it shows the intention from the team to use him as a receiving threat. We've also got Damian Martinez here, who in my opinion is discount Cam Scatterboo in this class. We've also got Jackson Dart, who, might get into the first round. Here's what I say about Jackson Dart. There's enough reasons to be in on him, and there's plenty of reasons to be out on him, right? He's not a perfect prospect. You could sell me on being in or out on the player. Truly, you could sell me on either way. Into tier 6, where we have a bunch of names. I'll list them off. Jarquez Hunter, Woody Marks, who did fall in my recent rankings, did a bunch of more, scouting on him. I'm not really liking what I'm seeing, unfortunately. RJ Harvey, who I am really starting to fall in love with. He'll probably move up rankings again here soon. Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe is basically Anthony Richardson from an athletic perspective. Maybe not as good of an athlete, but also from like an accuracy perspective. So he's a project. And unfortunately, if he doesn't get first round draft capital, it's harder to really bet on that kind of project, a la Malik Willis, for example, so it's a hard bet to make. Then we've got a bunch of wide receivers to end this tier who I really like. Xavier Restrepo, consistent slot producer. I see a ton of like Khalil Shakir to his game. I think he's going to just be a reliable, consistent producer of, the football, if you will. We've got Savion Williams, freak athlete, maybe the best athlete in the class. Ja'Cory Brooks, who constantly goes under-discussed. I really like his game. There's a ton of God-given ability to Ja'Cory Brooks. Isaiah Bond, who might be a top 5 wide receiver talent in the class, just has never been able to produce. If he gets draft capital, guys, if Isaiah Bond goes out there and he gets drafted round 2, I will be so in. I know the production is terrible, but the film is so tantalizing. I can't resist. Into tier 7, where we have Bashul Tutin, one of my favorite sleeper running backs in the class. Third on the Lemons to Lemonade team, constantly creating more with less. I actually talked about him in a recent video on my sleepers. I'll have my editor put that video up here. You can go watch that in detail if you want. Also, love me some Jordan James, right? I think there are about 17 to 20 running backs who I think could be serious contributors to an NFL team. Jordan James is one of those. Love me some Kyle Williams, my favorite deep sleeper in this class out of Washington State. I just think there's something special to his game. He is a tier 1 yak threat, super smooth mover, and a consistent producer out there in Washington State. Alec A.O. Manor. I am lower on Alec A.O. Manor. Here's what I'll say. If you compare him to some of the other guys in the class, the Jaden Higgins, the Jalen Noel, the Jack Besh, I see him in that category. I mean, a lot of people have him as high as wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6. Firstly, if you're just a spreadsheet guy, if you're just a model guy, he's not going to hold up, right? The drop rate is high. The contested catch rate isn't very high. The yak isn't there. Mediocre production. He's just not going to hold up in a model. But even the film is confusing because you got this big body. He moves well for his size. There's so much developmental upside there. But the issue is, for his big body being his highlight, he has inconsistent hands. He doesn't always high point the ball. Sometimes he has silly drops on film. So for him not to be able to create much separation, for him to have most of his targets accompanied by a defender, contested catch type of targets, and for him to have inconsistent hands, it's just hard for me to bet on a player like that. All right, moving on. We've got a couple players here. Ollie Gordon, who I am a little bit lower on than consensus. To me, Ollie Gordon, again, you compare him to some of the top names in this class, his production is absolutely awful. I mean, even if you just look at yards per attempt, 4.5 yards per attempt. That's rough, man. That is rough out there. And I know it's the Big 12. I know his offensive line wasn't good. I know the offense wasn't good in general. But even if you go out and compare him to Devin Neal, same conference, Kansas doesn't have a quarterback or a wide receiver that you're scheming up every week trying to stop. It was Devin Neal, and Devin Neal was still able to be very consistent week in, week out. Ollie Gordon was not. My concern is that this is the next Braylon Allen. This is the next Zach Evans. This is the next, player where people are obsessed with in Devy. But unfortunately, you know, they might not actually be the best NFL players. That's just my opinion. I think he's a big, fantastic athlete, but I don't think he plays the position well. We've got Kyle Monangai here, who, you know, is a nice little hamster ball of energy. Gunnar Helm, Mason Taylor. I like these guys, but I'm not obsessed with them. Quinn Ewers, who was disgusting to watch. I'll be honest, I did not have any fun, and it made me think so highly of Isaiah Bond. It made me think so highly of Matthew Golden. And then into tier 8, where we have names like Ricky White, Torrey Horton, Ty Felton, Raheem Sanders, who had a terrible, you know, fall off after his Arkansas year. In fact, I'm not sure Raheem Sanders and Ollie Gordon are all that different. That's just my opinion. Pat Bryant, Nick Nash, LaJohntay Wester, Khalil Mullings, and Caden Prather. I will say just quickly on Nick Nash, I don't personally understand the hype. I think the hype is from box score watching, if I'm honest. If that's rude, I'm sorry you feel that way. But we're talking about a guy in Nick Nash who had 171 targets. I'm sorry. If you have 171 targets at a school like San Diego State, right? San Jose. You better be putting up some incredible production. Then you go out there and you watch the film. You see a guy who's a 6-year senior, training wheels as a route runner. He's not dynamic or explosive. He moves more like a tight end than a wide receiver. And again, with 171 targets, that is the second highest target total in a single season in the last 8 years. Okay? So he should be putting up ridiculous numbers when he gets 171 targets. It's not that impressive, unfortunately, when you look at the film. So those are my updated rankings. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. My top 55 or so. Still a lot of scouting to do. I really do like this class, guys. I think it's getting better and better the more I dive into it. I think there's a lot of hope for even the NFL draft to make this class more valuable. Like, your second round picks could become much more valuable if the NFL draft goes in a way where these running backs get really good draft capital. So do me a favor, smash that like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.